If you build it, they will come. And we're not talking baseball diamonds, we're talking cars. That this week on Motoring 97.
TSN's Motoring 97 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas, for new longer-lasting performance friction carbon metallic brake pads.
You know, every week we get the opportunity to drive brand new cars on Motoring, but this week is a first. Hello everybody, welcome to Motoring 97. I am driving a Chrysler Copperhead. How new is it? Well, new isn't exactly the word. This is a concept vehicle, which means it really doesn't exist. But you know, for so many years, concept vehicles were nothing more than cardboard cutouts that collected dust all year, while manufacturers went back to building boring cars. But as we're about to see this week, Chrysler came along and said, you know what? It could be good business turning dreams into reality. Automotive journalists test driving new vehicles. Hardly a new concept. I mean, that's their job. But nobody could recall ever being asked to drive not one, but 4 fully operational concept vehicles. The Dodge Copperhead, the Chrysler Phaeton, the Plymouth Pronto, and the Jeep Dakar. Now, it's no secret that Chrysler has turned its financial fortunes around by simply building pretty cars that consumers wanted, and that includes turning concept into reality.
I really do think that, you know, we got into this whole period of the 70s where we were caught up in this era of regulation. It was fuel economy. It was everything was just like it was oppressive, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, the real need and desire on the part of the customer for performance and sparkling and sportiness and feeling good, that never went away. And I think you know we as the manufacturers went away from that, and it's just nice to see it come back, and it works. I mean, people are there, they will come.
The newest concept car to join the production line is the Prowler, and Chrysler is hoping the Prowler will do for Plymouth what Viper did for Dodge.
Prowler keeps our sense of focus sharp. Just as with Viper, this is an exercise in polarity. Those who don't get it or don't like it never will, and that's fine with us. But
you look back and you track the history of Dodge brand, for example, and what Viper was able to do for that, and how much that helped consideration of all the other products, whether it's the Ram or whether it's what we've done on the passenger cars. And in some ways, it provided a face for every one of those vehicles in that division. And Prowler does the same thing here. All of a sudden, you know, Plymouth is something that you say it with pride, and now all of a sudden it's something that puts a whole different twist on what we're doing with the brand.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I mean, contrasted to GM, who just released the Malibu, and its styling's taken quite a few knocks, and because they're scared to make any extreme moves, and it's a very bland styling. And then you contrast that with what Chrysler's doing, is putting something like the Viper and now the Prowler on the street. It's a courageous move, I think, and I think they're reaping wonderful benefits from it. I mean, certainly Plymouth will. Plymouth has had a reputation to be a staid vehicle, and now they have the Prowler, probably the most outrageous vehicle ever built on a production basis. So, I mean, they can't help but win.
There have been over 100,000 inquiries about the Prowler, yet Chrysler plans to produce only 2,000 Prowlers by year end, with 100 to 200 cars earmarked for Canada. Chrysler has utilized carryover parts in the Prowler from every vehicle in its model line to help turn the concept into an affordable reality, with a price tag in the States of $39,000 or $53,500 Canadian.
You can use the air conditioning system from, for instance, our Neon, and use the steering wheel from our Grand Cherokee, window switches, which don't have any relationship to the way the Prowler really is set up to function. We can use existing components and save tooling dollars for doing that. 45% of the overall dollar value of the car is based on carryover components that we didn't have to spend money to tool.
But don't get the idea that the Prowler is simply a recycled vehicle. In fact, it has been described as technology dressed with passion, as engineers use the vehicle as a test bed for new technology.
And that facility has really enabled us to try some things. You know, these are all aluminum body panels. It's got aluminum extrusions in the frame. It's the first application of a 20-inch wheel in the rear. It's got a number of exotic technologies in the magnesium, for example, in the instrument panel and some of the bracing. So a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily try on a production car, right down to things even like headlamps, you know, where, you know, you look at, you know, when we first went back to the guys and said, look, we're going to put the headlamps on the side of the car. And they said, you know, you got to be kidding me. But here we are. It's nice to see the company coming back, but the important thing is we're coming back with product. It's not coming back with finance programs. It's not coming back with marketing. It's coming back with things that people want, and that's in the end the ultimate compliment.
How can one company be so different? Was it because they were so desperate at one point they decided to build pretty cars?
I think it's the people. I think it's Eaton. I think it's Gale. I think they have a bunch of engineers and car enthusiasts at the top of the line in Chrysler, and I think they got a bunch of bean counters over at GM. I really do. I mean, they've got a bunch of brand marketers who distribute Johnson & Johnson products, and now they're running the company. And it's obvious they don't give a darn about cars, and Chrysler people do.
Whether or not the hot rodders will buy it is another thing. It's difficult to say because hot rodders really want to build their own.
We have a rule that says that you do not test two versions of the same car on test drive. Well, this week, you know, we're going to break that rule as we take a look at the ZX2 version of the Escort. We do this for two reasons. First of all, it's radically different from the sedan, and secondly, this is the vehicle that will replace the Probe in Ford's lineup. The engine itself is a technical tour de force. To begin with, it produces 130 horsepower and 127 pounds-feet of torque at a usable 4250 RPM. What makes the power usable is the variable cam timing. Contrary to most, Ford advance and retard the exhaust camshaft to control the valve overlap. Not only does this strategy optimize power delivery, it minimizes emissions and improves fuel economy. Put the boots to the gas pedal and the engine management system even shuts off the air conditioning to ensure that every ounce of oomph is delivered to the wheels. You know, we don't have very many close shaves on motoring, but with this Escort we did, and it happened at a four-way stop sign. As I went to pull away on the uphill side, I let the parking brake off, the headlights come on. The guy thinks I'm flashing him through the intersection, we almost collide. The headlights and the parking brake should not be interlinked, it's that simple. There are two transmissions available, a 4-speed auto and the 5-speed manual in our tester. Now I prefer the latter, not simply because it makes better use of the power, but because the ZX2 is a car that begs to be pushed. If there is a downside, it is that the engine churns away at a rather high 2800 RPM. Push further up the speed scale and the noise rises correspondingly. The ZX2 is suspended on gas-charged McPherson struts at the front end and a quadrillink design in back with sway bars at both ends and 185/65 R14 Goodyear Eagle GAs at each corner. When combined, the package offers superior handling characteristics. Body roll is limited, understeer is mild and confined to the limit. As for ride comfort, it is all it should be. Large undulations are swallowed in stride and the expansion joints are heard more than felt. Stopping power comes from a front disc rear drum design that is offered with an optional Kelsey-Hayes anti-lock system. Take the option. First, it's only $779, and second, it adds greatly to the stability. Full tilt stops from 80 kilometers an hour required just 114 feet, and the anti-dive nature of the suspension prevents the bumper from kissing the ground. The single biggest shortcoming with the ZX2 has to do with the amount of headroom. In order for me to fit, I have to slouch and lean my head to the right. Otherwise, I keep bashing my head against the side of the sunroof. The problem is twofold. First of all, the roofline and the sunroof combine to limit the amount of space upwards. The other problem is that the seat sits about 4 inches off the floor. Now, if they cut that down by about 2 inches, headroom would not be an issue. For a sporty coupe, the rear environment of the ZX2 has been well thought through because there's plenty of leg and headroom. Now, the headroom issue was solved by having the sunroof open outside the vehicle. That way, it doesn't eat into the usable height. The trunk is well thought through. It's large, it's got split folding rear seats, and these struts eliminate the usual intrusion into the usable space. So what's the drawback? The deck lid doesn't go far enough back, so it will take a chunk out of your forehead unless you're very, very careful when you're loading and unloading. Elsewhere, the driver's environment has a split personality. The left side is counterintuitive because of the placement of the window and mirror controls. Conversely, the climate and radio controls on the right side are eminently friendly. The instrumentation is a disappointment because it does not reflect the sporty personality of the rest of the car. Now, while I'm on the warpath that tilt steering can only be ordered in a package with vanity mirrors and cruise control, well, that's plain and simply absurd. Whatever happened to standalone optional items? On a more positive note, the seats are form-fitting, comfortable and provide plenty of lumbar and lateral support. The ZX2 is a very nice addition to Ford's lineup. It's got a wonderful powertrain, it's agile, and perhaps most importantly of all, it's fun to drive and it's affordably priced. Now, if only Ford can find a couple of more inches of headroom, they have a winner on their hands. Some call these new sport utilities sport cutes in reference to the fact that their cuteness outweighs the value of their utility. With the CR-V, there is little question as to which moniker best suits. First, it will hold a ton of luggage with the seats up or down. Second, even with the extra weight, and in our case it was a lot of weight, the ride and handling characteristics are not compromised. Lesser designs, especially where the weight bias is towards the back, tend to get a little light at the front. Not so with the CR-V. As demonstrated, there's no shortage of space in the CR-V. The question is it user-friendly? Okay guys, make sure you put your seatbelts on. On an upcoming update, we'll have the back seat report.
We'd like to show you the Hyundai Tiburon convertible.
Hyundai's Tiburon convertible received rave reviews when it was unveiled at this year's Detroit Auto Show. Despite the positive feedback, Hyundai has no intention of producing the car because they know the secret to the company's success.
Our products now are all between $8,500 and $20,000, and we think that's where today's consumer wants to buy an automobile and where the money is available. Price is very important in the entire marketplace, and we think that with the number of vehicles that are in the convertible marketplace today, that we would not be able to bring this car into line with what Hyundai has been known for, and that is a lot of value at a lower price.
But then again, car manufacturers have been known to change their minds.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns periodic inspections of your car's tread depth. The tires in your car need to be routinely inspected for tread depth. The bodywork on many of today's cars is such that it essentially hides a great portion of the tire. This Acura NSX is a perfect example. The tires are so wide and so tucked in, you don't get a real good look at them. This left front tire appears to have acceptable tread depth on the outer edge, the part that you see readily. And as we start to turn it out, you can see that while it's well worn, it's got an acceptable tread depth here. But as we look across the whole tread of the tire, when we get to the inside, it's completely worn through. As a matter of fact, it's several layers into the tread plies. Now, a tire like this on a car with this kind of speed potential is an accident going somewhere to happen. If you haven't looked at your tires lately on your vehicle, I suggest you make it a point to inspect them and do it on a routine basis. If you ever see a condition like this, it's telling you you need a wheel alignment and a replacement tire or tires in order to rectify this situation. You shouldn't drive on a tire with that kind of a tread depth. That's your Midas tip of the week.
You know, as we saw earlier, Chrysler is touting the Prowler as the hot rod of the 90s. But wait a minute, hot rods are built in garages and backyards. I mean, I ask you, can a major car company mass produce a vehicle like this and get it right? Well, you know, I know just the people who may have the answer to that question.
I've been fooling around with roadsters and hot rods for 40 or 50 years. So that's a long time. I think it's probably a hell of a buy at the price, and to make a street rod takes a long time and a lot of money. And here's you got one that's better than that for less money. So it's a pretty good deal.
Has Chrysler got it right, or is this just a toy?
No, I believe they have it right. I believe for the first attempt at doing anything of this scope to produce a car, to emulate what we're doing, they've done a hell of a job. Whether or not the hot rodders will buy it is another thing. It's difficult to say, because hot rodders really want to build their own. And that's the name of the game. It's been that way for 50, 60 years now. So they always want to do something themselves. But then you're going to get the crowd that can't do it themselves. They don't have the time. They don't have the expertise. And so that group of people may purchase a car like this. They probably will. I never thought it would happen, but it's a good thing, because this sport has become so popular that now a car company like Chrysler gets into it. It legitimizes what we're doing, and it puts us on maybe another little level, and it's great.
It's refreshing. I'm glad to see they do it, and I think they'll do well with it.
You gonna buy one?
I probably will.
Along with cars, fitness is the big craze out here in Southern California. And with that in mind, there's a rumor going on out here that our own Bill Gardner is producing a fitness video for mechanics. I don't believe it, so let's just squash the rumor, get back to business, and join Bill in the shop.
97, 98, 99, 100. No, it's true, Brad. I really am working on that fitness video for mechanics. There's a real void there. There isn't a single good workout video available for mechanics, and we've got to work so darn many hours we don't have a chance to go to the gym. So I thought I'd develop something you could do in the shop, at lunch hour, pumping a bit of iron with the car. Nah, I'm just kidding you. In any case, what I want to talk about this week is steering dampers. I'm going to literally put a damper on things. This vehicle that we've got on the hoist is a Jeep, a four-wheel drive Jeep. What happened with this vehicle was a couple of years ago, the customer took the thing in to a tire shop. They put a new set of tires on it, and right about that time, the vehicle picked up a pretty severe steering shimmy. So when he had his hand on the steering wheel and he hit some rough pavement, all of a sudden a severe shimmy would develop in the steering wheel, enough to almost take the wheel out of his hands. It was quite frightening, apparently. Now, this is a natural tendency of four-wheel drive vehicles to do this, and the steering damper is included in the linkage on many of those vehicles to combat this tendency. If it fails, you're going to have that shimmy. Now, in this case, it was incorrectly diagnosed. The customer called me and asked me for a price on a lot of components for the front end of this vehicle. He wanted a price on all new tie rod ends, a center link, a front axle track bar, shock absorbers, you name it, he wanted it put on there. He brought the vehicle in. When we actually looked at it and started checking these parts, we couldn't find any of them with any wear, play, damage, bent areas, or anything wrong with them. So I got on the phone, talked to the guy. Now he described this scenario to me. When we got back in there, we disconnected the steering damper and found out that it was failed, and that was the actual source of this shimmy. Okay, let's have a little bit closer look at the steering damper on this Jeep. And if your vehicle has a steering damper at all, the layout will be very similar to this one. One end of the damper attached securely to the vehicle here, and the other end of the damper attached to the steering linkage. When I turn the steering linkage, you can see the rod and the damper moving in and out. And right now, it's resisting me significantly as I try and turn this steering linkage. There's a lot of drag to this steering linkage. But in the vehicle, you don't experience that. You don't feel any heavier drag to the steering because of the power steering in the vehicle. It more than overcomes that. But the drag that this damper is creating on the linkage is enough to resist the tendency of a four-wheel drive to shimmy its front tires over rough pavement. And the bigger and heavier that the tires are in these vehicles, and I'm sure you're well aware that four-wheel drives can have some pretty darn big tires and wheels, the bigger they are, the more likely they are to cause a shimmying condition. And if your steering damper is bad, you're sure to have it. This particular steering damper that I replaced on the Jeep about 2 years ago has already started to show signs of minor leakage, but that alone is not cause to condemn this part. Believe me, we've tried it, and that one's working as intended. And this one that I've got in my hands right here is another example of that. Now, we were replacing this tie rod end that was worn out right here, and the customer knew that the steering damper attached to that tie rod end had been leaking for quite some time. You can see evidence of the leakage right here. All this grime that's collected around here is a result of that leak. But in spite of the fact that it was leaking, this one is still working exactly the way it should. When I push this thing in and out, it's got a significant amount of resistance in both directions. Now, this is the way you test these things. You disconnect it from the frame, leave the other end hooked to the linkage, and push it full extension in either direction. You should have significant resistance. If you don't, or it just slams in and out, or it has a bouncy feel, or there's more resistance in one direction than the other, you've confirmed the fact that you've got a bad steering damper and you need to replace it. And you certainly need to do that before you change any components in that front end that may or may not be failed. Because if this steering damper is no good, you're going to have a shimmy no matter how many of these parts you change. And you know what? This part just might be another good thing for my mechanics exercise video. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 97.
Is this intersection a place waiting for an accident to happen? Not if I've got anything to say about it, it's not. That's coming up next on Kenzie's Corner.
A portion of Motoring 97 is brought to you by the Solder Seal Gunk family of automotive products, makers of Puncture Seal Gold and Liquid Wrench.
This antenna serves a radio station that's in that building, and like radio stations across this country, they broadcast traffic reports all day to help drivers get home safe and sound. But like traffic reporters across the country, the people in that station use the term accident when somebody whacks something. Now, I got a problem with the word accident. To me, it implies that it's an act of God, that it's just one of those things, there's nothing you could do about it. But that's not true. Virtually every car crash or collision is caused by somebody. Either they did something wrong or they failed to do something right. Now, you as an innocent victim, maybe you didn't do anything wrong. You were just sitting there and some guy drove into you, but he did something wrong, and we've got to convince people that it is a preventable occurrence. Accident does not make that assumption. Now, you might think I'd be the last guy to jump on some political correctness bandwagon, but we've got to convince the public that car crashes are preventable. They are crashes, they're collisions, they're not accidental. So this is a memo to traffic reporters across the country. Call it like it is. They're not accidents, they're crashes, they're collisions. I'm Jim Kenzie, and whatever you call them, I'm getting out of here before I cause one.
You know, it takes a lot to turn heads on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, California, but obviously this parade of prowlers is doing the trick. One final word before we go. I was driving this prowler a couple of hours ago through Hollywood, and a gentleman about 50 years old yelled out, "What year is it?" He actually thought it was a vintage hot rod. The ultimate compliment. That's it for now. We'll see you next week for more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
The fact that we are a cold community, and we decided that we would market our cold weather, and people thought that that was sort of a novel idea. However, Ford has responded, and they have a very strong presence in our community, and I believe that they're very happy with the cold weather we have here, and we are marketing it.
TSN's Motoring 97 has been brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas for new, longer-lasting performance friction carbon metallic brake pads.